Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. Alex stepped out of the transport pod and immediately felt the peculiar tug of Eryndor's gravity, a gentle tug that made his feet feel lighter than they had in decades. He took a deep breath of the air, crisp with a faint metallic tang, and the scent of lavender that seemed to seep from the planet's crystalline forests. The first step on this new soil should have been triumphant, he thought, the kind of cinematic moment where the hero plants a flag and surveys the horizon. Instead, he tripped over a stray root-like crystal, flailing like a toddler learning to walk, and nearly face-planted into the soft, glowing moss carpeting the ground. Well, he muttered, brushing himself off, so much for heroism. At least it's soft. His house, a modest, angular structure of iridescent metal panels and transparent walls, stood serenely amid the violet plains. Alex had imagined that moving here meant peace, anonymity, and a life uninterrupted by the noise of Earth. But as he fumbled with the entry lock, he heard a low, humming vibration that didn't belong to him, the house, or the planet itself. He froze, one hand on the door handle, and scanned the horizon. That's when the first pod landed. It descended with a barely audible whir, a compact vessel shaped like an elongated teardrop, shimmering as though it were woven from liquid mercury. Alex's heart thumped with a mixture of awe and panic. Maybe it's a friendly delivery service, he told himself, though his voice cracked in disbelief. The pod doors slid open in a smooth, fluid motion, revealing a line of alien women stepping out with synchronized elegance. They looked human enough to make him pause, but their differences were impossible to ignore. Their skin shimmered faintly, a pearlescent sheen that caught the sunlight in flashes of soft pink and green. Their eyes shifted colors with every subtle turn of their heads, from amber to teal to violet, and long, graceful ears arched from their heads, tapering to points that reminded him vaguely of deer, if deer were sophisticated interstellar beings. One of them, no taller than 1.5 meters, stumbled over a small gravity stabilizer hovering in her path, sending it spinning into the air. She blushed, her cheeks glowed violet. Alex choked back laughter, covering his mouth with one hand. "I swear I'm just imagining this," he whispered, though he was. "Aliens, long ears, floating crates, peaceful life my foot." As they unpacked, Alex tried to keep his distance, retreating into the shadows of his home, peeking through the translucent panels like a paranoid ghost. Yet even from a distance, the women's behavior was mesmerizing. One levitated a crate effortlessly and opened it with a delicate gesture that made the contents float in midair, neatly arranging items without touching a single one. Another inspected a tool that looked like a cross between a vacuum and a laser scalpel, and after a moment of concentrated study, placed it on a stand that appeared out of nowhere, all while humming a note that made the air tingle. Alex realized he should probably call someone, himself, his old therapist, or even the local authorities, but instead he leaned against the wall and muttered sarcastically, "Yeah, totally peaceful, nothing suspicious here." A small mishap broke the tension further. One woman, evidently the youngest, tilted her head and poked a floating container. It wobbled, teetered, and then exploded with a soft pop, sending a spray of what looked like shimmering jelly across the yard. The woman squeaked and her ears twitched back in embarrassment. Alex couldn't help himself and let out a laugh so loud that he startled himself. The aliens glanced at him, clearly puzzled, and one, taller, with a silver braid trailing down her back, smiled faintly. Not menacingly, but with a knowing glint that made Alex's chest tighten. The next morning he attempted a cautious introduction. He had armed himself with a half-smile, a tray of prepackaged muffins, and the fragile hope that first impressions mattered. As he approached, one of the women, blonde with ears curved in elegant arcs, tilted her head in curiosity. Alex cleared his throat, holding up the muffins. "Hi," he said, "I baked these." They didn't look particularly human in expression, but one of them reached out, touched a muffin with a floating fingertip, and it levitated gently into the air. "Interesting," she said in broken galactic common, a musical, lilting voice. Alex blinked. You talk." He pointed at the muffin, unsure whether it was polite to talk about food in their culture. She tilted her head, ears brushing back, and a note of amusement entered her voice. "It speaks. You taste." By the time he returned to his own yard, covered in crumbs and faintly sticky jelly from yesterday's mishap, Alex realized that Eryndor's peace might be a myth. But there was something irresistible in their quirks, the way they moved, spoke, and occasionally glitched against gravity with a mischievous twist. It was exhausting, confusing, and hilarious all at once. He found himself laughing at things he wouldn't have dared on Earth, like the way a silver-haired woman hovered upside down to reach a ceiling shelf, her braid falling like a comet, or when one of them attempted to mimic his human wave and instead flung herself backward, narrowly missing a floating shrub. He returned home that night, flopped onto the floating couch, another one of Eryndor's delightful innovations, and whispered to himself, "Quiet life. Yeah, right. But at least it's entertaining." The lavender sky deepened, turning soft hues of rose and blue, the crystal forests glowing faintly in the evening light. Alex sipped his synthetic tea and imagined the stories he would tell when he returned to Earth, though he doubted anyone would believe him. Already, he could feel the pull of curiosity and mild terror mixing in a heady cocktail of fascination. Days passed in a rhythm of absurdity and awe. The alien women proved to be astonishingly adaptable, trying to understand Earth humor, while Alex found himself reluctantly learning their customs. He discovered that one of them, the tallest with silver hair, had a penchant for practical jokes. She would carefully float objects into his line of sight only to retract them before he could grab them, leaving him swatting the air like a confused boxer. Another preferred to recite poetry that caused the air to shimmer in resonance with her voice, which made Alex laugh and cringe simultaneously. Occasionally, he would attempt to speak their language, only to produce a string of unintelligible syllables that made them tilt their heads and giggle. It was during one of these awkward language lessons that he tripped over a gravity tether, sending himself into a half-spin that landed him on the soft moss with a thud. One of the women hovered above, her ears twitching with barely concealed amusement, and offered a hand. "You recover," she said. "Good attempt." Alex accepted the hand, realizing that her grip was warm and surprisingly strong. "Thanks," he replied, smiling despite himself. "You float well." She tilted her head, eyes flickering a kaleidoscope of colors. "You fall amusing." By the end of the first week, Alex understood something crucial. His life on Eryndor would never be the quiet existence he had hoped for, but it would be infinitely more colorful. The alien women brought chaos, humor, and unpredictability into his carefully structured plans, and the strange blend of miscommunication and fascination was intoxicating. He found himself staring at their floating crates, shimmering clothing, and glowing skin with a mixture of dread and anticipation. There was a subtle tension that danced just beneath their laughter, a promise of connection that was as thrilling as it was terrifying. And yet, for all the disruption, Alex found himself laughing more than he had in years. At the end of a long day, lying on his couch that hovered a few inches above the floor, he mused aloud to no one in particular. "Maybe this isn't what I expected, but it's a hell of a lot better than silence." Outside, the lavender night stretched endlessly, dotted with unfamiliar stars and the occasional flicker of a distant spacecraft. Somewhere nearby, a pair of alien eyes glimmered in amusement, watching him adjust to this new, chaotic, and hilariously unpredictable life. And in that moment, Alex felt the first flicker of something like belonging, or at least the faint hope that, on a planet this strange and vibrant, life, even chaotic alien life, could be genuinely wonderful. Alex woke to the gentle hum of Eryndor's twin suns rising, their light spilling in iridescent streaks across the crystal-studded floor of his living room. Even his synthetic tea, brewed with a convenience module he had stubbornly insisted on bringing from Earth, shimmered faintly in the sunlight, its surface rippling as if eager to start the day. He stretched, feeling gravity tug at his limbs in a way that was still slightly unfamiliar, and remembered, again, that quiet mornings were apparently a myth here. The moment he peeked through the translucent wall separating his yard from the alien neighbors, he saw them already at work, their movements precise, elegant, and somehow mischievous all at once. One of the women, the silver-haired one whose braid always seemed to float in an impossible rhythm, hovered upside down in midair, inspecting a device that resembled a small drone crossed with a teacup. Her ears twitched with subtle impatience. "Calibration imperfect," she murmured, and Alex blinked, wondering if she was talking to herself or the device. Then, to his surprise, the drone beeped, wobbled, and zipped straight toward him, as if to test his reflexes. Alex raised a hand reflexively, and the drone bounced harmlessly off his palm, leaving a faint static tingle on his skin. He muttered, "Friendly neighborhood robots, just what I wanted." Breakfast that day had been a series of minor disasters. Alex tried to toast bread in a levitating toaster he had installed as part of Eryndor's gravity-friendly appliances, only to have the slices drift into the ceiling, where they stuck, slowly rotating like tiny golden satellites. One of the alien women hovered nearby, watching the spectacle with what could only be described as bemused curiosity. "Earth, food rituals fragile," she observed. Alex sighed, plucking the bread from the ceiling. "Fragile, yes. Also terrifying." She tilted her head, ears twitching, and let out a soft laugh, a melodic sound that made Alex's cheeks heat. He suspected she found his clumsiness both entertaining and endearing. Later, as he attempted a cautious exploration of their yard under the pretext of friendly, neighborly greetings, Alex found himself entangled in a series of escalating comic mishaps. The alien women had set up a training obstacle course of floating platforms, shimmering energy fields, and devices that hummed with subtle pulses. "Testing human adaptability," one of them said as he tripped over a low-energy tether, sent tumbling into a hovering ball that bounced him gently into a small pond of liquid crystal. The sensation was oddly pleasant, like a massage combined with a mild electric tingle, but Alex sputtered and coughed, emerging from the pond with sparkling droplets clinging to his hair. "I guess I'm adaptable," he muttered, dripping and embarrassed. The women clapped, or at least, their version of applause, which involved synchronized floating hand movements and harmonic vibrations that tickled his ears, eliciting a laugh from him despite himself. As the day wore on, Alex began to notice subtle patterns in their behavior. The women were curious in ways humans rarely were, but their curiosity was tempered with a sense of playful testing. One hovered near him, tilting her head as if evaluating his reaction to gravity-altering plants that stretched and shrank at will. "You find amusing?" she asked, and when he nodded, a small smirk crossed her lips. Another had taken to rearranging his tools and furniture while he was busy with chores, testing his patience, or perhaps his sense of humor. Alex discovered an odd joy in these encounters, laughing at his own exasperation while gradually learning the rhythm of their eccentricities. That evening they invited him in their broken galactic common to join them in what they called communal resonance. It was part ritual, part experiment, and part sheer alien whimsy. Alex stepped hesitantly into a circle formed by the women, each floating inches above the ground, their ears twitching in anticipation. As they began to hum, the sound didn't just echo. It resonated within him, vibrating through his bones and making the air around shimmer faintly. He staggered, laughing nervously. "Okay, definitely not a quiet life," he admitted aloud. One of the women's eyes flickered a soft amber, and she tilted her head in silent encouragement. "Participate, or amusing failure," she quipped, and the humor in her tone made him grin. In the following days, Alex learned more about their quirks and customs, each interaction a blend of challenge, confusion, and laughter. The silver-haired one, clearly the ringleader, introduced him to levitation etiquette, demonstrating how to manipulate gravity fields around small objects. Alex spent hours floating his kitchen utensils into precarious positions, each misstep eliciting a mixture of giggles and melodic reprimands. Another woman had a fascination with human humor and tried repeatedly to mimic Earth jokes, though her timing was off, and she frequently delivered punchlines before the setup, sending Alex into fits of laughter. Food preparation became a daily comedy. Alex attempted to show them how to make scrambled eggs, only for the eggs to levitate out of the pan and congeal into glowing, floating orbs. One of the women poked an orb with a fingertip, causing it to wobble and hum like a tiny singing jellyfish. "Edible?" she asked. "Probably, technically," Alex replied, eyeing it suspiciously. She tasted it, chewed thoughtfully, and gave a faint nod, eyes flickering violet. Alex couldn't stop laughing, and the sound echoed across their yards, mixing with the soft hum of the crystals and the low gurgle of distant streams. Alex began to notice moments of subtle connection amidst the chaos. The youngest woman, the one who had first stumbled over the floating crate, would sometimes hover nearby while he tinkered with his gravity tools, offering quiet advice in lilting tones. He discovered that her laughter had an infectious quality that made even the most frustrating mishaps amusing. During one particularly clumsy attempt to hang a painting using anti-gravity tacks, he accidentally sent the painting spinning into the sky. She tilted her head, ears twitching, and remarked, "Art, airborne human," which made Alex groan and laugh simultaneously. One night, Alex sat outside on the floating deck, gazing at Eryndor's two moons casting pale reflections across the crystal fields. A pair of alien eyes glimmered in the distance as one of the women approached, floating gracefully through the lavender air. She perched nearby, the tips of her long ears brushing the soft light. Alex hesitated, unsure whether it was appropriate to speak first. She tilted her head in that timeless alien way, and he laughed nervously. "So, quiet life, huh? Total myth." He could feel the warmth of her gaze, and despite the slight awkwardness, there was a comfort in her presence. "No," she said softly, eyes flickering through violet and teal, "chaotic but enjoyable." Alex realized that humor had become their common language, bridging the vast gap between species. Their interactions were a delicate dance of missteps, laughter, and occasional embarrassment, but in that dance he found connection. Even small gestures, floating a cup of tea toward him, nudging a hovering device to avoid him, or mimicking his exaggerated expressions, carried meaning. He found himself anticipating these moments, seeking out their playful challenges, and laughing at his own failures in ways that would have seemed impossible on Earth. By the end of the second week, Alex began to see the alien women not merely as neighbors, but as companions in a strange, unpredictable experiment of life. Their quirks, humor, and subtle guidance taught him patience, resilience, and joy in the absurd. Each day brought new lessons. Gravity could be playful, communication was a dance, and chaos could be entertaining. Even the smallest mishaps, the spilled crystals, levitating muffins, and floating furniture, became markers of a life being built together. He started to understand the rhythms of their days, the ways their long ears flicked when they were curious, or how their skin subtly shifted color with emotion. He discovered that their humor often masked curiosity, and their challenges were invitations to explore not just Eryndor's oddities but the deeper nuances of connection. One evening, while attempting to mimic a levitating juggling exercise, he ended up tumbling into the soft moss with a thump, and a chorus of melodious laughter filled the yard. Alex lay there catching his breath and whispered, "All right, I think I'm officially in over my head, but maybe this is exactly where I belong." The alien women continued to hover and twirl around him, their long ears tracing arcs in the air, their voices harmonizing in laughter and gentle teasing. Each mishap, each awkward exchange, only drew them closer in understanding and camaraderie. By the end of the second chapter, Alex realized that his quiet life had not materialized, and that the chaos, confusion, and humor of interspecies interaction was beginning to feel like home. And while he had yet to understand all the rules, he knew one thing. Life on Eryndor, for all its unexpected levitations and bizarre etiquette, was more vibrant, more alive, and infinitely more entertaining than anything he had left behind on Earth. The mornings on Eryndor had settled into a rhythm that Alex could no longer call quiet, but he had grown fond of its chaos. He awoke to the gentle hum of the crystal forests vibrating through the floor, a sound that no longer startled him but instead seemed comforting, like a heartbeat belonging to the planet itself. Through the translucent walls, he could see the alien women floating among the levitating flora, their long ears flicking with delicate precision, their eyes shifting through violet, teal, and amber as they laughed softly at some shared private joke. Even the silver-haired one, who had begun as a figure of subtle intimidation, now waved at him with a smirk that was as much teasing as it was familiar. Breakfast became a collaborative spectacle. Alex attempted to prepare a simple meal using Eryndor's floating utensils, but every ingredient had its own gravitational pull and personality. Eggs bobbed like tiny moons, bread hovered like miniature satellites, and the juice refused to stay in its container. One of the women, clearly amused, nudged a levitating slice of toast toward him, then tilted her head with a look that suggested, "Don't spill this, Earthling." Alex caught it with a grin, feeling more competent than he had any right to, and realized he was no longer simply surviving in this alien environment. He was participating in it, part of a delicate, absurd dance. Their mornings often included what they called exploratory rituals, but Alex had come to think of them as guided chaos walks. He followed the women across meadows of crystal flowers that shifted in color depending on the observer's mood, and through shallow rivers that reflected the dual suns in fractal patterns that were impossible to predict. One of the women pointed out a cluster of floating orbs hovering just above the surface of the river. Alex attempted to touch one, and immediately found himself spinning helplessly as the orb levitated him into the air before dropping him safely on a soft patch of moss. He landed with a laugh and an audible groan, and the youngest woman's laughter rang through the grove, infectiously light and musical. By now, Alex had begun to understand the subtle social dance of their community. The teasing, the small tests, the mischievous rearrangements of furniture or floating objects, all were expressions of connection, not malice. One evening, as they gathered in the yard beneath the slowly shifting auroras of Eryndor's sky, he realized he was learning to anticipate their quirks and, more importantly, to enjoy them. He floated a cup of tea toward the silver-haired woman, who accepted it with a mock-dramatic bow, causing Alex to laugh aloud at the absurdity. Even the normally stoic, amber-eyed woman rolled her eyes and smirked, ears twitching in amusement. Humor had become their bridge, and through it, Alex found himself opening up in ways he had not on Earth for years. He discovered joy in mishaps, patience in the unexpected, and even a willingness to risk embarrassment for the sake of shared laughter. Gravity, cuisine, language, all the things that had once terrified or bewildered him now felt like puzzles to be solved with the help of his alien neighbors. He realized that his desire for a quiet life had blinded him to the thrill of engagement, the richness of a life unplanned and unpredictable. As the days passed, subtle attraction began to weave through their interactions, though it was tempered by the playful, teasing culture of the women. One afternoon, Alex was repairing a small grav-field generator that had malfunctioned, when the silver-haired woman hovered over his shoulder, offering guidance in lilting tones. Her ear brushed against his arm as she leaned closer, and he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the faint energy pulses from the device. He laughed nervously, brushing the moment off with a joke about earthling clumsiness. But he knew the playful tension was there, as delicate and electrifying as the floating crystals around them. Subplots that had once seemed minor began to converge. The youngest woman's fascination with Earth customs led to a miniature festival in Alex's yard, with floating lanterns, melodic hums, and improvised games that left them all in stitches. The amber-eyed woman, who had maintained a quiet, analytical air, finally allowed herself to share stories of her home world, revealing a dry, ironic sense of humor that matched Alex's own. Through these moments, Alex realized that the boundaries between species were less rigid than he had assumed, and that understanding often required vulnerability, laughter, and a willingness to adapt. Conflict, though softened with humor, still appeared in subtle forms. One evening, a minor miscalculation in a levitation experiment sent several objects spiraling toward the house, including a delicate crystal orb that narrowly missed Alex's head. He cursed under his breath, only to be met with a chorus of melodic giggles. The incident was resolved with playful negotiations, gentle teasing, and a joint effort to recalibrate the device, leaving everyone exhausted but laughing. It occurred to Alex that conflict could be a source of bonding, a catalyst for connection rather than isolation. As the chapter unfolded, Alex found himself reflecting on the profound changes within him. The man who had fled Earth in search of silence had learned to embrace unpredictability, to find joy in the absurd, and to connect across cultural and biological divides. His initial fear and hesitation had transformed into curiosity and engagement. Humor had become a lifeline, a way to navigate the strange and beautiful complexities of Eryndor, and a bridge to understanding the alien women who had once seemed inscrutable. One particularly vivid evening, they all gathered beneath the auroras, floating in a loose circle. Alex attempted a clumsy display of levitation, spinning one of the floating lanterns into the air and narrowly avoiding collision with the amber-eyed woman. Laughter erupted, filling the air with harmonics that resonated through the crystal fields. In that moment, Alex understood that connection was not about perfection but about participation, about willingness to stumble, laugh, and rise again in sync with others. The silver-haired woman floated to his side, eyes flickering violet. "Human, you adapt, surprisingly entertaining," she said, her voice melodic and teasing. Alex smiled, feeling the warmth of recognition in her words. "I think I've learned a few tricks from you all," he replied, gesturing to the floating lights, spinning utensils and shimmering orbs around them. The younger woman nudged a floating teacup toward him, and he caught it effortlessly, a small victory in the ongoing dance of learning and laughter. By the time the twin moons rose high in the sky, Alex knew he had found something far richer than quiet solitude. He had found connection, humor, and the joy of navigating a life that defied expectations. The alien women had challenged him, teased him, and guided him through chaos with grace and levity. He realized that the peace he had